Welcome, everybody. My name is Lee Miller, and I'm from Richmond, Virginia, and we're going to discuss a topic that I only became aware of last year. Believe it or not, I had never heard of the Great Exodus. And somebody mentioned it to me last year, and I'm like, what? And then they quoted this verse in Jeremiah, which I'm going to bring up here in a moment. And I was like, I got to look into this. So I did. And so this is my early report. This is the 5 p.m. report. I'll have something else at 11. Okay. So anyway, this is called the Greater Exodus. First question is, what does that even mean? Greater Exodus. Because I'm thinking about the regular Exodus, the first one. So we got Israel, and they're hanging out in Egypt, and then they leave town. I think of that as the first Exodus, okay? So now there's going to be a greater Exodus. And so I'm looking at this greater Exodus, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, so instead of it being just one country where everybody's located, they're scattered across the entire planet. And so I'm thinking, so in a manner of speaking, you say they're exiting all of those nations to come back to Israel, so I can do that. But before I realized that, I coined my own term, and you'll find that I do that. I make up words on the fly. And this particular phrase is the regathering of the scattered exiles. Made more sense to me. Now, this is a section here called On Tap. Lets you know what I'm covering in this presentation. So you just have it's just a bullet like you can see. The next one is I shall scatter. Well, there are some passages that talk about the scattering of Israel if they misbehave. So I'm going to have, it's coming up in the presentation. I'm going to talk about that. I got a few verses. Okay, so this is what this is. There's also decision making. And then I have to cover the history of Israel because it's very important in having a little bit of understanding of the history of Israel so that we can understand about what caused the need for a regathering. So I'm going to go through that, not real long, but enough so that it will refresh your memory of those things that have happened. And then we're going to go to Deuteronomy 31 through 10. Now, tomorrow, when I am doing the Torah study in the afternoon, I'm also going to be addressing Deuteronomy 30, but at least you will be able to have like a preview because we're actually going to do, the focus of the Torah study tomorrow is chapter 32, but we're going to cover 28 through 34. And of course, needless to say, 30 falls in there. So, but it's really more important that it show up in this presentation because it does deal with the scattering and the regathering. And so I've tried to bring those pieces together so you can understand how I am seeing it. Doesn't mean I'm right. It's just this is how I'm seeing it. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. This is Greater Exodus, and this is the passage which started the whole thing off for me. It shall no longer be said, as Yahweh lives, who brought up the people of Israel out of the land of Egypt, but as Yahweh lives, who brought up the people of Israel out of the north country and out of all the countries where he had driven them. So I'm thinking to myself, well, I can't imagine that they're going to stop talking about the first Exodus. I mean, that's a pretty important event in the beginning of Israel. I mean, that's pretty important. So maybe they'll talk more about the second one where we regathered people. Maybe they'll talk about that more, but I think they'll still be talking about the other one too. So I was like, okay, well, whatever. I'll just let it go for now. I will bring them back to their own land that I gave to their fathers. And we're going to learn a little bit about that too. Okay, so my phrase is the regathering of the scattered exiles. Now, this presentation links to another presentation that will be taking place later in the feast. But I had to put it here. That passage in Jeremiah 16, and then this is like a boxing match, versus the first fruits in 1 Corinthians 15. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. I have some things that I think this is how it's going to play out, and we'll see what you think. All right. Now, in Genesis 15, you are familiar with the covenant that kind of took place between the Almighty and Abraham. Now, it really didn't take place with Abraham because he was taking a nap. We all know this, okay? So, but he was there, and he helped set it up, so he was part of that admin crew pulling that together. But anyway, so you got this thing going on where the covenant is, and it has to do, I was thinking about this morning too. God was really excited to do this. This was early on in the relationship. Of course, we've just gone through the failure of the 70 nations. That'll be discussed tomorrow too. So I feel like he was rebounding. And so we got this thing, and it's going to be like, I'm going to give you guys this land. It's a free gift. But what is not mentioned in that section is behavior impacts inheritance. Behavior impacts inheritance. It's not mentioned in the wording of the covenant. And so I don't know how far I'm going to get into this today, but as you all know, the land has something to say about the whole matter. Yes, I know it's a pile of dirt in the Mediterranean basin that is defined by some water. Yeah, I got that. Nevertheless, and this is in Torah, the land has something to say about the whole thing. So, just so that you can be thinking as we go along, the land is very patient. And you'll see that when it's said that the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. But yet, iniquity. So this means that you can misbehave a lot before the land will vomit you out. So that's good to know. And that was working on behalf of the Amorites, as this passage in Genesis states. So I'm looking at this and I'm going, okay, so what does it mean when the land is going to vomit out the people? And so I went to the place where Joshua goes into the land. Well, the land is not really doing the vomiting per se. The land is just like hanging out. It's almost like the land waits until the iniquity is full, and then it sends a report up to heaven. And, okay, these people need to be vomited out. I'm putting it in your hands. And then we're done. And so then somebody decides something. And in this case, Joshua was the one who was assigned to go in and exterminate. So he has his own independent company. He exterminates land when the land tells God it's time to do something. So, I'm trying to figure out these relationships, and I'm not trying to take this too far, but I'm always entertained with Judges 9 when the trees get together with the bushes and they start talking about who's going to lead. You all know the one I'm talking about, right? So, I try to keep this stuff all here. All right, so anyway, here is verse 18. In the same day, made a covenant with Abraham, unto thy seed have I given this land. But, now the but does not appear in your English translations. I'm not sure if it appears in the Hebrew either, but it appears in my translation because, as I say, behavior impacts inheritance. And this is a problem because he has made a commitment. Let's use the word commitment for a moment because we know what that means. He's made a commitment that they're going to get the land. The problem is Israel has to behave. And if Israel does not behave, the land is going to override the covenant promise and boot them out. That's a problem because, and you've probably seen verses that relate to this, there are places where it says that these people are a stiff-necked people. And there are other choice words that are used as well. So, he put all this pressure on himself, and God has now backed himself up into a corner. Because unless the desires of the people of Israel are changed at this location, this covenant is an epic fail. Because the land will vomit them out. So we have some problems. Let's see how this plays out. All right, I'm going to talk about some scattering. Probably won't talk much about it. It's pretty straightforward. If you will not hearken to me, but walk contrary to me, I will scatter you. When thou shalt beget children, and children's children, and you shall have remained long in the land, and shall do evil in the sight of Yahweh thy Elohim to provoke him to anger, Yahweh shall scatter you. If thou wilt not observe to do all the words of the Torah that are written in this book, and fear this glorious and fearful, by the way, I looked up the Hebrew there in this book, Yahweh thy Elohim, Yahweh will scatter you. Anybody see a pattern? I said that I would scatter them into the corners. Yahweh shall smite Israel, root up Israel out of this good land which he gave to his fathers, and shall scatter them. Remember, I beseech thee, the word that thou commandest thy servant Moses, saying, if ye transgress, I will scatter. Psalm 44, thou hast scattered us among the heathen. Jeremiah 9:13, because they have forsaken my Torah, which I set before them, and have not obeyed my voice, neither walked therein, but have walked after the imagination of their own heart, after Balaam, which their fathers taught them. Therefore, I will feed them, even this people, with wormwood, and give them water of gall to drink, and I will scatter them. Everybody sees this pattern. Jeremiah 31, hear the word, O ye nations, declared in the isles, he that scattereth Israel will gather. So even though, if you're feeling negativity, you're on. That's what's going on here. But every once in a while, the prophets throw in he that scattereth you will gather you. So there's this glimmer of hope, it appears. Ezekiel, yet I will leave a remnant. We like that word, the R word. That you may have some that shall escape the sword among the nations when you shall be scattered. And I scattered them among the heathen, but I scattered them among all the nations. Yeshua should gather together in one the children of God that were scattered. James 1:1, servant, Yeshua HaMashiach, to the 12 tribes which are scattered. Interesting. Okay, what's the problem? The Almighty initiated the covenant. The gift of the Lamb was free. Abraham was not involved. But what was required? Good decisions. Good decisions were required. However, bad decisions means you're going to be removed from the land. So that's a problem. So we're going to look at bad decisions in just a moment. Was obedience to Torah unrealistic? I think that is a fair question, and I know that some people will ask that. And I like this particular verse. This commandment which I command you is not too difficult. That was a tough one. With perfection not possible, a system to reset was included. I like that. God was prepared. He was not caught off guard. I really do appreciate a lot of his decisions. Okay. Continuous evil intent was the real problem of the heart of the people. And that's just not good. It's not good. And obviously, we see, looking back into history, we can confirm that that is true. So now let's just take a quick moment to discuss decision making. I prepared something for you here. I think it goes without saying that making decisions is something every one of us do every day. The only question is how many decisions do you make and how many of them are bad? Okay? All right, so here are the options. As I see it, is it the good decisions or there's bad decisions? All right, so I wanted to give you some examples. And the ones I'm going to give you a couple. And I have listed them under bad. Okay, so the first example I'm going to give has to do with the animal kingdom. Okay, and in this particular picture, I do not know if this monkey is under the influence. Okay? But if this monkey has decided to do what it looks like he's going to do, I categorize this as a bad decision. But let's move from the animal kingdom to the human kingdom. You know, we're smart people. We got this thing. All right, so I don't even know what to say about this picture. All right. Then there was hope. There was hope, and it was I need to make better bad decisions. So that's a step up, right? Okay. But I'll tell you what the problem is. I've been making bad decisions since 1969. I think it's a pattern. So, but here's the answer. Good decisions come from experience. And I'm like, okay, all right. This is Mark Twain. Okay, so the first part of this quote, good decisions come from experience. Experience comes from making bad decisions. All right, so I'm just saying that Israel experienced bad decisions frequently. Actually, I think it's Deuteronomy 30 verse 1 in the Hebrew. It says when Israel returns from their insane behavior. And I was like, ooh, I like that. Okay, so anyway, let's move on to the history of Israel. During the time period, and I'm going to do it this way. There's the Babylonian captivity, and then there's Israel right before the captivity, and then the Almighty leaves the temple, and then the thing is just getting started. There's some false prophets that get in there and say, oh, we're only going to be over here a couple years, then everything's going to be restored. And so it was just an ugly mess. And so when the 2-year period was up, the elders went to Ezekiel's house during the captivity to inquire of the Almighty. And interestingly, God said he refused to be inquired of. And so it was like, normally it says, if you reach out to me, I will answer you. But not today. So there's the answer. So he suggested the elders set about to a critical self-evaluation. In other words, you need to ask some questions about your behavior and see how they line up with my instructions. So cause them to know their abominations. And verse 30, are you defiling yourselves the way your ancestors did? So I submit, is this a story of election and salvation, talking about the history of Israel, or is this the story of apostasy based on behavior? True, false? Instead of accepting their role as benefactors and agents of Yahweh's honor, they've brought shame to the divine name by running after other gods. I think that's true. With this type of behavior, Israel history must end in punishment unless God steps up and puts an end to the wash, rinse, repeat cycle, which was what was happening with Israel. I mean, seriously. All right, might this begin, like Mark Twain said, bad decisions when enough bad decisions have been made? So I have put together a historical outline in 6 parts. Let's fly through that. Israel rebellion in the distant past, phase 1. Israel in Egypt. Israel in the desert, first generation. Israel in the desert, second generation. Israel rebellion in the recent past. Israel in the land. Israel in exile. Israel's future transformation. Israel in the desert of the peoples. So this is a general outline, overview type thing. All right, so here we go. Israel in Egypt. In the day that I chose Israel, I said, cast ye away every man the abominations of his eyes, and defile not yourselves with the idols of Egypt. But they rebelled against me. So I decided to pour out my wrath on them. But then I changed my mind. This is God. Okay? Phase 2. Israel in the desert. Wherefore I caused them to go forth out of the land of Egypt and brought them into the wilderness. I gave them statutes and judgments. I gave them my Sabbaths, but Israel rebelled against me. So I decided to pour out my wrath on them. But then I changed my mind.
Hallelujah.
Indeed. Phase 3. Israel in the desert. Just second generation. But I said unto the children in the wilderness, walk ye not in the statutes of your father, neither observe their judgments, nor defile yourselves with their idols, and hallow my Sabbaths. Notwithstanding, the children rebelled against me. So I decided to pour out my wrath on them. But then I changed my mind. Phase 4. Israel in the land. Yet in this your fathers have blasphemed me, in that they have committed a trespass against me. Phase 5. Israel in exile. Are you defiling yourselves the way your ancestors did? As I live, saith Yahweh Elohim, I will not be inquired of by you. That was the answer to the elders' question. Phase 6, Israel in the desert of the peoples. And that which cometh into your mind, this is a tricky sentence because it came out of the KJV. And that which cometh into your mind shall not be at all that you say, we will be as the heathen, as the families of the nations to serve wood and stone. Yahweh says, I will rule over you. I will bring you out from the people and will gather you out of the nations wherein you are scattered, and I will bring you into the wilderness of the people, and there I will plead with you face to face and cause you to pass under the rod, and I will bring you into the bond of covenant, and I will purge out from among you the rebels and them that transgress against me. Well, just how are you planning on doing that? Because everything you've done for the last almost 1,000 years has failed. So what's the plan? Okay, we'll answer that in a moment. Inside the millennial kingdom, and you shall know that I am Yahweh when I shall bring you into the land of Israel and into the country for which I took an oath. See, this is a big time. This was not a in-passing comment. This was oath. This was oath level. It's important. So there is a weight when you make an oath, a vow. When you do that, there's a weight involved. Yeah, I try to measure my speech just because of this. So when somebody says, so can we do this at 2? And my answer is going to be, I think we can. I'm going to do my best to be there at 2. And then I put it on my calendar and make it a very important thing. And only if something keeps me from being there, I'm going to be there too. That's how I like to think. If I'm going to agree to do something, I want my yay to be yay. You all know that about Matthew 5. Yay, yay, nay, nay. I do not want to establish a reputation of saying that I will do this and then not do it. Because you get grace 1, 2, 3 times, but if it becomes a pattern or lifestyle, you're going to run out of grace. I don't want to do that because I'm a representative of the kingdom. I need to do better. I need to do better than that. So anyway, okay, keep going, 43. And there you shall, now this is the verse. We're in the millennial kingdom. So that means Yeshua's return, and blah, blah has happened, and blah, blah, blah has happened, and blah, blah, blah. You know, the whole thing has happened. We're moving forward. What does he say? And there shall you remember your ways, all your doings, wherein you have been defiled, and you shall loathe yourselves in your own sight for all your evils that you have committed against me. Well, I'm looking forward to that. Yes, sir. As a list, this is what it looks like. You shall remember your ways. You shall remember all your doings wherein you have been defiled, and you shall loathe yourselves in your own sight for all your evils that you have committed against me. Yes, the millennial kingdom is going to be awesome. And this is my problem with the whole thing. All right, here we go. So we're moving to Deuteronomy 30 now. We can take a look at this. And it shall come to pass, when all these things are come upon thee, the blessing and the curse, which I've set before thee, and thou shalt call them to mind among all the nations, where Yahweh thy Elohim has driven thee. Here's the key. Good decisions can follow on bad decisions. It's called experience. So there's going to be a time in which they will call to mind why they're in the situation they're in. And I'm not speculating and say, okay, let me tell you what I think is going to happen. I think they're going to call to mind blah, blah, blah. Nope, this is the text right here. This is what it says. Verse 1, this is what it says. Because I was always concerned about, well, just exactly how is God going to solve this major problem of land vomiting? Okay, got to solve that. The only way it can be solved is if people behave. People don't want to behave. They want to make bad decisions. But apparently, if you make enough bad decisions, you eventually go, this is not working out. By the way, people who want to learn more about bad decisions, be sure to watch the movie Groundhog Day. All right, here's what I suggest. Go to the parable of the prodigal son. Read it. Watch Groundhog Day, and then go back and read the parable again. And your mind will explode. It's wonderful. Okay, verse 2. And shall return unto Yahweh the Elohim, and shalt obey his voice according to all that I command thee this day, and thou and thy children, with all thy heart, with all thy soul. 3. Then Yahweh will turn thy captivity. So do you notice the order of that? Let's do it again. I'm a chronological guy, very Greek. It says, and shalt return. Let's go back one more slide. Thou shalt call them to mind where you've been driven, and shalt return unto Yahweh thy Elohim, shall obey his voice according to all I command this day, then the children with all their heart, with all their soul. Then Yahweh thy Elohim will turn thy captivity and have compassion, return and gather thee from all the nations where he's been scattered. So to me, I'm reading this chronologically. Israel is going to have to do some decision making, and it's going to have to be the right decision making before God is going to step up and do his part of it. That's how I'm reading this text. Okay? 4, if any of them be driven out unto the outermost parts of heaven. Doesn't matter. I'll get them. 5, Yahweh will then bring you into the land which thy fathers possessed, and thou shalt possess it. And he will do thee good and multiply thee above thy fathers, which is wonderful. Okay, that's good. And he will circumcise thy heart and the heart of thy seed. That's the key. Open heart surgery. It's been needed for many years. Okay? To love Yahweh thy Elohim with all thy heart, soul, that thou may live. 7, Yahweh thy Elohim will put all these curses upon thine enemies. This is interesting, flip-flop here. So I don't know if this is passive-aggressive, but you know that Israel is being punished. And then as soon as we get this thing sorted out, now I'm going to punish everybody that was used to punish you. I've often wondered about that, but I'm going to let it go. I'll discuss that with God later. 8, and thou shalt return and obey the voice of Yahweh to do all his commandments, which I command this day. 9, he will make thee plenteous. This is just, these are the blessing stuff. It's going to be really good. It's going to be really good. But guess what? The next slide is called Fun with Math. I'm a programmer. This is what I do for a living. And it uses a lot of logic. And one of the things that happens in the programming is if this is true, then computer do this. But if it's false, then computer do this. I can't tell you how many times I write that. Okay? And so God is also a programmer. And he uses the same logic we do. I should say that I use the same logic that God does because he came first. Okay, but it's in verse 10. The entire programming logic system of computers is verse 10. And here's what it says. If thou shalt hearken unto the voice to keep the commandments and statutes written in the book of the Torah, and if you turn to Yahweh, blah, 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 blah. And then he goes on to say blessings, curses. So, if obedience, or I like to say behavior, is correct, and the system for missing is built in for resetting, it's all there. We just have to take and use it as it's been taught to us. Then everything's good. But if we don't obey, then we get the other part of that mathematical equation, which is really bad. And the more bad you are, the worse it gets. And I'm not even going to mention how worse it gets, because it gets really worse. Okay? All right, let's continue. Now, you remember the slide that I put up early on when I was talking about what is on tap is the Jeremiah, which is the whole thing about the gathering, versus 1 Corinthians 15:20, which is the first fruits passage. So let me put that up there right now. In this passage, it says, but now Christ is risen from the dead and become the first fruits of them that sleep. Now, I've done the research on here. I've looked at the Greek. I've gone to the Torah and looked at the Hebrew and the Greek that's under it to see that it is an exact match. So I'm satisfied with that. We're talking about an agricultural perspective. And when you think about it, and I'm doing first fruits later next week too, so I'm not going to get real extensive here, but I just want to mention that the concept of first fruits from an agricultural perspective is this is the best of the best. Now, I'm not having anything negative to say about the rest of the harvest, because the whole concept is once the first fruits have been presented, then do the other harvest, do the rest of it. So you got this small amount and you got this huge amount. That's good. I like it. It works for me. I am so excited that I have been given an opportunity to be a first fruit. Woo! And in my mind, not everybody gets the opportunity. Could be wrong, but it doesn't seem like everybody gets the opportunity, especially some people I talk to. They just don't. They don't seem to get it. They just don't seem to get it. So, when I signed up to apply for first fruit status, it was like, I know nothing. Everybody remembers that German sergeant, right? I know nothing. Yeah, there I was. So I set out. I said, okay, well, I've got this incredible revelation of God. He's gone to a lot of trouble, notwithstanding men messing with it, but he's gone to a lot of trouble to prepare this revelation so that I have access to it today. And so I really need to go ahead and start studying the scriptures, not just reading it, studying it. And then when I started, I realized I didn't know how to study. I was like, oh, man. So now I got to stop. I got to learn how to study, which took a year. And then I came back and said, okay, now I know how to study. I can get started. And so I've been doing this for 25 years now, and it's a lot of fun. And so I like to look at these things and see, what can I learn from God today? What has He revealed in His Word that He allows me to know and understand, and that I can even become a better first fruit tomorrow? You know, when I jump out of bed, after I pray, 1 Timothy 2, 1 through 4, God says He desires that everybody on the planet has an opportunity to hear the truth. It's in the text there. Not exactly that way, but He wants them to come to a knowledge of the truth. And so the way that He wants that done is for us to pray for leaders. And it says right there, pray for leaders. It names some leadership people, like I think the king and maybe emperor and some other things there. But after it has this short list, then He says, just pray for everybody in leadership. So I start out with President Joe and his administration, and I'm praying that the righteousness of God would attack him. No, I'm praying that the righteousness of God would manifest itself so that he could see it. And then I pray for my governor in Virginia. Most states probably have a governor. I pray for my governor and his administration for the same thing, because I'm praying for the leadership of the people who have impact on who I am. Now, I admit I don't pray for other leaders because that would be a long list, but I'm trying to get into the whole. So when I get up, I'm starting with President Joe and moving on from there. And then it's like I'm really excited to get ready for today. What are we going to do? You know, those type of things, because God is very interested in working with us as a team. So God works with me and the two of us, and we do stuff. And I need to keep Him excited. You know, so I have this responsibility too. I'm saying, okay, I'm ready. What are we doing? So just saying. All right, so anyway, that's verse 20. Verse 22, all in Adam die, even so in Christ shall all be made alive. And here is an important verse for us who are applying for first fruit status. Every man in his own order. So in other words, resurrection, there's going to be an orderly process to it. Christ the first fruits. After that, they that are Christ at His coming. All right, so thinking about that chronologically, they that are Christ at His coming. So we're talking about a specific time. All right, now look at this. Matthew 24, disciples get together with Yeshua, and here's the question. Tell us, when shall these things be, and what shall be the sign of thy coming, the end of the age? What they really said is, when shall the regathering of Israel take place? And what will be the sign of your coming? And the end of the age. And so Yeshua decided not to answer that question. So from verses 4 to 29, He answered a whole bunch of other questions they didn't ask. And they're listed there. Okay. So they asked for the sign. So He gave them many signs that were not the sign. And then finally in verse 30 He says, okay, now I'm going to give you the sign. Then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. Then all the tribes of the earth mourn. I wonder who that's talking about. And they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. You all remember there is a verse in Zechariah which says they will see the sign in the heavens and then they shall mourn. We're actually singing that song tonight. In 1 Thessalonians 4, He shall descend from heaven with a shout, voice of the archangel, trump of God. The dead in Christ shall rise first, and those who are alive and remain will be caught up with them. And Revelation comments on this and says, the rest of the dead live not until the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection, but the second resurrection has no power. The second death has no power over the first fruits. So that's important. So, going from there and looking at that chronologically, I want to go back to the situation where the temple is in the millennial kingdom. This comes out of Ezekiel 43. The temple discussion is 38 to 40, 5, I think. And here is 43:10. Thou son of man, show the house to the house of Israel, that they may be ashamed of their iniquities, and let them measure the pattern. And if they be ashamed of all they have done, show them the form of the house. And so, the title of this presentation was The Greater Exodus and Why You're Not a Part. If you are applying for first fruit status, you are going to have a different event in your life than the regathering of Israel and be taken to some location, secret location. I don't know where they're being taken. And then you're going to be judged by passing under the rod. And then you're going to spend the next 1,000 years loathing yourself on a daily basis for how you have behaved. That's not what's happening with the first fruits, because Revelation says, and they shall rule and reign for 1,000 years. So we're going to be in charge of the planet. So you're a different group. You have moved out of that situation into a new situation. This is how I see it. I'm telling you, this is how I see it. Not saying it's correct. I do not see myself as part of the great regathering, because I am already, in a sense, I've been gathered in. And the final decision, as Paul says both in Philippians 3 and 1 Corinthians 9:27, he says that I continue to make sure my behavior is what it needs to be, so that when I have finished my ministry to the nations, I will not be rejected. That's strong. That's strong. We all are in that same place. We all have to respond with the covenant responsibility of correct behavior. And you'll see this starting in Yeshua's message in Matthew 7:21 through 23, when he says, many in that day will say to me, Lord, Lord, and talk about all the power things that they did. And when he says, I never knew you, the key word there is anomia, violation of Torah. Then when you go to 1 Corinthians 6:9, Ephesians 5, and Galatians 5:19 through 21, they all talk about behavior, and Paul says, if these is a part of your regular behavior, you will not inherit the kingdom. And there's more verses than that. So I take away from that, even though I'm not part of the regathering, and I'm okay with that, I still have to pass the test. What did you call it, honey, last night in that meeting about job something?
On-the-job training.
On-the-job training. We're in on-the-job training right now. Okay? The adversary works with us to make us better, challenges us, comes against us, pushes against us as strong as he's allowed to, because he's on a short leash, remember. And the whole idea is to help us to be better overcomers every day. So his job is to help us pass the test. Because when he pushes on you, you're going to do better. And every day you're going to do better. So the team is in place. Yes, he's a disgruntled employee. I understand that. But yet he is helping us to accomplish the goal of passing the test. So it's all here. We got the indwelling Spirit. Every day we can be filled with the Spirit. We've got the body of believers. We know what's going on. Yeshua on the cross, he said, forgive them, for they know not what they do. We know what we do. We know what we do. As we continue to become more like the Most High, we are representing him. I use the term gold standard. You are the gold standard of humanity. People need to see your life daily to determine what it should look like for everybody else. That's a heavy call. But we've been getting everything we need. We got the Spirit and we got the adversary. So we are ready to roll. I'm excited about that aspect of it, and I have nothing negative to say against the regathering of the tribes. I totally support it. I just don't think I'm going to be there. And that's the end. Thank you.